Hey, everybody, and welcome to Ben and Nate's Questions That We Ask People on the Internet. I am one half of your co-host, Nate Fay. I'm a licensed massage therapist practicing for over 18 years up here in New England. And when I'm not in my practice, you can find me on the road presenting for Eric Dalton and the Freedom from Pain Institute.
Man, you got that down, Nate. My name is Ben. I'm your other host of Ben and Nate's Questions We Ask People on the Internet. I've been doing massage for over 20 years, and I know a few things about massage. And that's why we have this show, because we like to talk about massage. We like to ask you guys questions, get your input, and then we talk about the question that we asked on the internet, which can be found where, Nate?
Can be found on our Facebook page, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify.
Right on. So let's get into this episode 21. Let's see. I want to talk to you first, Nate, about how you been. It's been a couple weeks since I seen you. What's been going well in your world recently?
Yeah, we had our milestone episode a few weeks ago, episode 20, with some cool success of people showing up, and we took a short little break, and here we are again. What's been good, man? Weather's getting nice. It's been cool and sunny here in New England. Getting out on the boat a little bit finally. So that's been fun and enjoying some summer nights. And I'm heading to Costa Rica. This episode will probably air when I'm in Costa Rica, but I'm heading to Costa Rica with Dalton Gang this Friday for our week-long paradise retreats.
That is cool. I want to say hello to future Nate in Costa Rica and everyone else that's going to be in Costa Rica in the future. Hello, future selves.
Love it, buddy. How about you? What's happening in your world in Nebraska?
Oh, man. You know, I love to talk about all the photography stuff I've been doing, but last week I did inventory of the massage lotion I use. And let me tell you, I ordered a gallon of massage lotion over a year and 3 months ago, and I still have just under a quarter of it left. What does that tell you about how much lotion I use? I haven't gone through a gallon in over a year, and it's going to go bad pretty soon. So that means I'm going to have to buy more, and they don't sell like half-gallon sizes because that would be perfect. So I'll probably end up having to throw some away, but I don't know. I think that's kind of cool. Not cool, but interesting that the work that I do does not require a whole lot of lotion.
I've been using the same product for 18 years, and I can't figure it out, but all of a sudden over the past probably 7 or 8 months, it's incredibly hard to get. Price has gone way up, and they used to sell larger bottles of it. Like you could get a 12 to 18 ounce bottle of it, which lasted me forever. Now I can only get them in 3-ounce sizes, and the prices have just skyrocketed. I'm a creature of old habits, and I'm trying other products, and I just can't find anything that I like.
Yeah, is that their marketing ploy? New 3 ounces for the price of 18.
Pretty much. It's a total drag, but is what it is.
Oh, well, I got to tell you something. I just recently got fired from my job at the bakery.
Ben, I'm sorry to hear that. What caused you to get fired at your job?
Oh, you know, it was just really upsetting that I got fired because I really needed the dough.
Yes.
You get it? Needed the dough. You know, you got the massage, you got the other thing that we're going to get into this week's episode, correct? What are we talking about this week?
Talking about firing our clients. And a long time ago, right, when nighttime TV was cool, there was a popular show that featured a gentleman who's probably infamous these days, so we probably won't get into him. But he added the tagline, "You're fired."
I think one of the things that will keep you safe in the massage room is you don't talk about politics and you don't talk about religion. Those are two of the things you just steer clear from.
And, you get a wide variety of clients that come in. And of course, the longer they stay with you, the more comfortable they are. I always say if my walls in my treatment room could write a book, I could probably write about 6 books at this point, all bestsellers of the stories that I've heard in my treatment room. We're like both kinds of therapists. We're hands-on therapists. And I think our clients think that we're sort of, talk therapists as well. Right. But man, do you get clients that bring up politics in front of you?
I do, and I never am too specific either way on which way I lean, because really it doesn't matter. In that room, I'm not there to get people riled up.
You never know, right? we have to keep some mystery and modesty
Yeah,
to who we are. So with that being said, Ben, let's read him the question this week.
we got a doozy of a question this week, and I'm going to read it straight from our Facebook page, which is where you can submit your own questions if you want. Ben and Nate's questions. We ask people on the internet. Look us up on Facebook. The question reads: We have all heard the famous words "You're fired," but have you ever had to do it? Have you fired a client? How did you approach this situation? When did you choose to do it? And what was the outcome? So there's our question. That's what we're going to rap about tonight.
It's a heavy one. It's another heavy one.
That is, and you know what? I don't know if we'll get into this or not, but I needed some help, so I went to Chat GPT for a little bit of help to figure out how to answer this question. Like I said, I don't know that we'll get into it, but Chat GPT had some interesting things to say. AI, you know?
Interesting. I'll be
Yeah.
looking forward to hearing that tonight. So, what else? What do you think?
Boy, there's a lot of places we could start. How about this? Have you ever had to fire a client? Yes or no?
I was racking my brain, right? It's been a long time. And I don't think I've ever actually outright fired a client. Like and I think there's like a lot of ways that we can think about that, right? We can talk about, and we'll get into all this, right? We could talk about how we might verbalize this to somebody directly, right? Like, I can't work with you anymore for this set of reasons. There's always the old, just disappear into the night. You don't return their phone calls, which is another method. And there's a few other ways that we could probably do that as well. So I think shooting from the hip, I don't think I've ever directly fired a client. However, over years of experience and I guess maybe some expertise here, I have found a way, to sort of, you sort of know at the beginning. I think with a lot of years in this business and working with a lot of people, you get to the point where you know at the first visit, is this person for me and am I for this person? I think I've even gotten it down to the phone call, making that decision, how I want to proceed. And we can open up all those doors tonight too. So with that being said, what about you? Have you ever fired a client?
You know, looking back on it, I don't know that I have directly, like you, I don't know that I've directly fired a client, but there are situations where, you refer them on, and that could be
Yeah.
considered firing a client. Like, hey, I don't think this work is going to be helpful for you. I need you to go see so and so PT wherever.
And I think maybe getting into this tonight, right? You're fired. It leaves room to think that something maybe negative happened in the treatment room, or perhaps the therapist had a negative enough experience to no longer work with that person. We had some really good answers out there.
Yeah, tell me
You
about what people had to share about their experience with firing people.
I wondered this when we posed that question, right? I wondered if therapists would think that sort of negative thing that happens in the treatment room. Maybe a client is inappropriate or perhaps says something that's, maybe comes off as a joke and then it's said maybe one too many times and now it's not a joke anymore. Or maybe they just want to talk politics all the time despite how you feel and you don't want to hear that. And I think that's how some of these answers sort of took it. But then there's another big reason that people talked about, which is people doing the cancel under that, whatever your cancellation policy is. So maybe like a last minute cancellation, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because we're all human and emergencies do happen, right? They even happen to us. I've had to cancel last minute a few times in my career. But with that being said, has that client done the last minute cancellation one too many times? And is that a reason to no longer work for them? So we had a couple of those. We had, of course, our number one fan, Miss Barb McKinney, who chimed
Yay,
in.
Barb.
We love Barb from New Hampshire. And that was her. That's what she talked about. She talked about the client that canceled, one too many times. Enough where it was obviously becoming a little bit of an interruption in her regular schedule. And I liked what Barb had to say. Barb goes on to say, this is how she worded it to the client. It appears you are very busy at this time, so I'm going to remove you from my schedule. And if things settle down, perhaps we can revisit appointments at that time. That's a real gentle way. Still leaves the door open for that client to come back. And I think if they're a good enough client, they'll realize perhaps their actions have caused them to pay, maybe get fired, but at the same time understand it, right? Oh yeah, I get it. You are right. I am kind of busy and maybe now is not a good time. And it doesn't leave any room for negativity or what everybody fears, that scary 1-star review on the internet, something along those lines. And then we had a couple other people chime in about politics, right? One of our amazing viewers chimed in about clients that were offended that they did not take the COVID vaccine. That's pretty interesting too, because I think that many of us can remember back at that time. And I can remember clients walking in my office as we started to reopen again, stopping in my doorway and directly asking me, "Did you get your vaccine?" And that's playing politics a little bit. Really uncomfortable time. And I'm not going to turn this into that, but I can certainly see how that would cause a change in the relationship with your patients.
Yeah, and I would call the COVID kind of an extemporaneous circumstance. But we could open that up broader to someone just being sick, or do you have a cold or a flu? We definitely don't want to be working on people when they're sick. I don't want to be exposed to those germs.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I guess if not to go down this wormhole, but I guess I always say if there's perhaps one good thing that whole situation brought is that clients are more apt to let you know ahead of time if they have a cold or a flu. Because much like you, I don't want to get sick either. But certainly, if you have a view on not wanting to get it and your client's adamant about wanting you to have gotten that vaccine, I could see how those relationships could falter, particularly during those heated times and stressful times and unknowing times, if you will.
Well, I have so one of my favorite quotes is the hardest part of communication is the assumption that it has taken place.
That's
And I,
right.
I think a lot of times we make assumptions. So let's just take Barb's example, for instance, where she said she's going to take this person off the schedule because they've been, canceled too many times? Something like that.
Cancel. Yeah,
Yeah.
canceling one too many times.
And there's a bunch of different things we can talk about and discuss, but I think one of the things that makes a lot of things easier for us is managing expectations, which is something we've talked about in the past, but also having those policies and procedures in place for ourselves and letting our customers know. So saying either having it written down or just knowing, hey, if I get someone who cancels on me within 3 to 5 times, that's when I know it's time to have that conversation with them. And we don't know what their situation is. So I always like I have a friend of mine, he was on the show, Eric Stevenson, and he talks about dealing with drama, and he's got 4 steps for dealing with drama. And I want to talk about this a little bit because I think it's perfect for helping to manage some of these situations. And the first one is you state the facts. You say, we'll just call this person Jody. Let's call her Jody. I don't know why I
Like it.
picked that name. Okay, Jody, I've noticed that you have canceled the last 3 appointments in a row within, I don't know if there's cancellation policies, so I'm just going to make up. She canceled outside of the cancellation policy. So she was still fine, but I've noticed that you've canceled 3 of the last times you were supposed to come in. I just wanted to bring that up to you. So that's number one. You state the facts. Then you let the person respond. You never know what's going on in someone else's world. So Jody may say, well, I'm sorry, my mom's on hospice right now and I'm just having a hard time getting away. When things are over, I think I'll be able to get back to my more normal schedule. And that could be legit. So step 3 is you kind of evaluate their response. Does that sound legit or does that sound like horse manure? So then we get our chance to say, well, step 4 would be, let's make an agreement. Okay, Jody, I understand that your mom's on hospice. Let's let's do something where you can check in with me, or let's make an agreement so that this doesn't happen anymore. How about you check in with me 2 days before your appointment, whatever. You make an agreement to say, hey, we're going to continue this, or hey, let's just stop the appointments until whenever hospice is done, and we'll go from there. You call me when you're ready to come back. So you make that agreement. That way you manage the whole situation. No one feels bad. No one's getting you're not making assumptions about why or why not someone can't make the appointment. I don't know. What do you think? I feel like I've been talking too much about that.
No, I actually like hearing what you're saying, and for a few reasons. I often ask myself the question, Ben, that when things go wrong, right, or when there's a lack of client or patient compliance, I ask myself the question, whose fault is it? And most of the time, I actually end up finding the fault with myself and sort of a lack of maybe clarity or understanding, or as you say, lack of communication. I always pose the question in my classes, right? How many people give their clients things to do after a session, an exercise or a stretch? And everybody raises their hand. And then I say, how many of you have clients that follow through? And everybody laughs, right? Because they know that people don't follow through. And then I ask the question, whose fault is it? Right. And I've started to learn a long time ago that I think, learning and growing as a therapist is that you sort of realize that some of that stuff is actually maybe our fault or my fault. And communication, right, and expectations. And I had a good friend of mine email me or message me the other day asking me if I had a cancellation policy. And I was thinking about this, that I think how our expectations and how we state stuff, and this is just my experience of like working and going to other massage therapists, is really lacking out there. It's really lacking, right? And I've learned this. Ready for this, Ben? From the dental industry. And the dental industry is the best in communication and stating expectations and reminders. And I've taken a page out of their book. When a new client calls, when a new patient calls, after they tell their story, because that's what they do, after that, I state all of my expectations. Here's how the first visit works. Here's how much it is. I don't work with insurance. Here's my cancellation policy. I hold all new visits with a credit card. If this all sounds like a green light to you, would you like to proceed? If they say yes, I say, great, let's take the next step and look at our calendar. Now, after I fulfill that appointment and make that appointment in my software, I send them an email that states everything that I just said, including directions, including parking, including how to enter my office and what to bring with them if that's applicable. Everything's laid out in black and white. Now, here's the page I took out of the dental industry. My son's orthodontist sends me reminders 2 weeks before his appointment, 1 week before his appointment, 48 hours before his appointment, and I'm asked to confirm every single one. And while that maybe feels like harassment, I don't look at it that way. I look at it as somebody wants to know that 110% that I know that I have an appointment and they're not going to have an hour hole in their schedule. And I can tell you, since I've started doing the not only stating my case, sending the letter, and then turning to a format, of a week and then 48 hours ahead of time reminders. I can tell you one thing, that my cancellations and last minute cancellations have basically cut down to almost zero at that point, or with 48 hours or more notice so that I have time to fill that spot.
Yeah. So what I'm kind of hearing is we manage the expectations that people can expect from a visit with us, all the way down to, because it's one thing to have a policy, but if nobody knows about this policy, what good is it?
What
So
good is it?
I like the way you approach that. You let them know verbally, hey, this is the way I operate, just the basics. You don't need to go over everything. But there are times where I think it's possible and necessary to have either I don't know, a written policy, or a policy that you have kind of not necessarily written, but that you go by, if someone talks about, let's just say politics, and just because someone talks about politics isn't grounds to fire them. But you have that conversation and you just say, hey, during this session, next time we're just going to avoid talking politics because it's just not going to work. So you bring it up with them. They continue to talk about politics. So then you tell them again, maybe your rule is if they do it 3 times, then they're done. And you could say, hey, look, I've continually asked you to not talk about politics. So therefore, I'm just going to have to ask you to go see someone else. That there's a reason. So if you manage all of these expectations, there should be no reason why you have to just come out and tell somebody you're fired. You say, hey, based on what we've talked about, I can no longer see you.
Yeah.
And no one's a bad guy. You don't have to argue about it. It's like, this is what it is.
Right. Right. Yeah. And, in my own vacuum, in my own bubble, I can safely say for me, at least from a perspective of that, I've been lucky enough that, again, I feel like that aspect of my practice is managed. However, people slip through the cracks and start to take advantage of our kindness, they obviously look at us as nice people, right? We're spending time with them. So this can still certainly slip through the cracks and come up. So, again, how to fire somebody and make it a sort of a positive thing. I really like how Barb kept it a positive thing. And you and I have said this on episodes, plenty of episodes before. We're everybody. We're the front desk person, we're the therapist, we're the toilet bowl cleaner. And we have to wear so many hats in our practice that it's hard to be the good guy and then be the bad guy right afterwards. It's extremely difficult.
Yeah. In my experience with dealing with massage therapists over the last 20 some years, we're not good at saying no to people in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having those firm boundaries. And there's reasons why we have these policies, where there's reasons why we have cancellation policies. But it's one thing to have a cancellation policy, it's another to enforce it. So I want to ask everyone out there listening that has a cancellation policy, how many of you actually enforce it? Because that's the hard part. And, I had to do that just this last week. Hey, I'm sorry you couldn't make it in, but I still need to charge you for that appointment.
It's hard to do, and you really have to maybe pick and choose your battles. Certainly a client that's loyal, been coming to you forever, they had an error. They do I want to charge this person, or do I want to understand that perhaps it was just a goof up this one time? So, but regardless of how I feel and how you feel about cancellation policies, at the end of the day, I think that any therapist listening can take a page out of both of our books and state everything as clear as possible in the very beginning, verbally and written, and leave no stone unturned.
Yeah. I want to go back to that cancellation policy, Nate, and you give someone the benefit of the doubt, you let them slide. And this is a conversation I've had with other massage therapists is where do you draw the line? Oh, it's okay that Susie, this was her first time, I'll let it slide. But so-and-so was in the hospital with the flu or something like that, and I'm going to have to charge them. Like, where do you draw that line if you're just wishy-washy about your boundaries of when you're gonna enforce that cancellation policy? And I'm just throwing that out there because I've had some good discussions with other massage therapists about those types of things.
It's a lot to think about, and I think we're talking about You're Fired tonight. I think this could be like a good part 2, another spin-off episode.
Another spin-off, yeah.
So I've never experienced this, and perhaps you have. But then there's the conversation about inappropriate behavior, something that I've never had to deal with. Right? Have you had to deal with that?
I have had to deal with that. And, when we do have to deal with something, that's when we decide, oh, hey, guess what? I need a new policy. So I have this stated in my room. I forget the exact wording, but basically any inappropriate behavior, wording, jokes, anything like that will not be tolerated and grounds for terminating the session. And, you know, people read that and they ask me and they're like, people really are inappropriate with you. And I go, it's happened in the past enough times where I need to do something about it.
Yeah.
And it's not fun. It's not fun to deal with.
I can't imagine, and like I said, I've never necessarily had to deal with that. So somebody wrote in and talked about an 80-year-old client. 80. And this 80-year-old client was just pushing boundaries with her, according to what she wrote. And, started to get pretty inappropriate. And she had to talk him through that. Hey, it was disrespectful and she couldn't work with him anymore. And, the session was over. So really kudos to that therapist. And again, I can only imagine the power dynamic as well, gender roles and male, female, and that whole thing and what that must feel like. Probably pretty scary, right?
I'm sensing another spin-off here also, Nate. We could talk
Yeah.
a whole episode about this, but yeah, that is definitely you know, to this it's something they have you do sometimes in school, role play these scenarios. And role playing helps, but when you're in the situation, it doesn't get easier. But if you've said the words before, the words come out easier. It doesn't make you feel any different, but
Right.
at least you have those words to pull on to get yourself out of the situation.
So we've talked about cancellations. We've talked about inappropriate behavior as a reasons to fire a client. And certainly probably this latter one that we're on now. I would only imagine, that's like an immediate thing, right? That just happens once. And it's like, hey, we're done, we're done, son. It's over with.
Yeah.
Versus that third or fourth time cancellation repeat offender, where maybe it's like a little bit more drawn out.
You get to evaluate the situation. Maybe it's kind of discreet, but regardless of what it is, you as the therapist know what's going on, and if you're not comfortable, that needs to stop immediately.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like I said, it's not an easy thing, not a fun thing to deal with. I sympathize with anyone who's had to deal with that in the past. So I'm thinking, what if I read off some of the things that the AI suggested that you do for firing people?
I'm ready. I want to hear
Okay.
I want to hear what the robots say.
All right, Robot says firing a massage client can be a delicate process, but it is sometimes necessary to maintain a professional and comfortable working environment. Here are steps you can take to handle the situation respectfully and professionally. See how well it's worded? I could have never talked like that.
That's amazing.
I know. I mean, the things that AI can do now, it's just insane. But here's step one: is evaluate the situation, which is kind of what we've talked about already. Evaluate the situation, state the facts. This is what I saw, not like what you interpreted. Not I saw you. I don't know. Pull down the sheets. I don't know, something like that. So evaluate the situation. And then it says to check your policies, which we kind of talked about. You should
Yeah.
have some sort of policies in place that you can refer to. Then AI says to document the issues. So it says documenting the issues can be helpful if the client questions your decision. I don't know about that one. I mean, maybe if you're firing someone in an employee situation, documenting would be good, but I don't know that I'm going to document too much for firing a client.
I do want to say just to that, there's a kind of a cool feature on my software that I can click a button for a reason to cancel a client. So I can click cancel, I can click void ticket, I can click no show, so on and so forth, and then just quickly input my reason. And if I click the no show button, it's kind of a cool feature. It actually puts like a little alarm on their file so that if I do rebook them again, it actually like pops up a message, like a warning message. Client's
Oh,
no show rate is at 25%. And, and kind of reminds me because again, getting on in this field and seeing so many people over the years maybe all of a sudden this person shows up a year later and I've like forgotten about that situation, then our aging brain is reminded. So I do a quick documentation, which is helpful just in case this person reemerges over the next year or so.
That is a
But
good
go on.
point. That's a great
Yeah.
point because we'll see people and then they'll disappear for a couple of years and then they come
Right.
back.
Yeah, they definitely do.
Yeah. So, quick question for you. What is the software that you use?
Well, it's called DaySmart software. In their early stages, it was called Orchid, and now it's been rebranded as DaySmart.
Okay, we'll have to reach out to DaySmart and see if they want to sponsor Ben and Nate's questions that we ask people on the internet.
I'd like that.
Yay, DaySmart. All right. So moving back on to the AIs, their next step is they tell you to prepare your communication. Plan what you're going to say, be clear, concise, and professional. And then they tell you to choose the right method of communication, whether it's going to be in person, over the phone, email, that kind of thing. And then they suggest that you be direct but polite. Oh, and they even have a sample message if you are going to send an email. Dear client, I hope this message finds you well. After careful consideration, I have decided that it is in our best interest to discontinue our professional relationship. This decision is based on whatever reason. I appreciate your understanding in this matter and wish you all the best in moving forward. And reading that, I also think that if you are going to fire someone and send them on, maybe you should have some referrals lined up, unless it's someone being inappropriate. You don't want to send somebody on that's being inappropriate. You don't want to do that to anyone else. You just say, hey, we're done.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the inappropriate behavior is in its own category. If anything, what I'll see is therapists do is go on their local forums, like we have Connecticut LMTs, and I'll see therapists post, hey, had a bad experience. This was their information, just so that doesn't happen to you. Right. But that's its own category. So these other situations, right? We're living in a world with social media. We're living in a world where perhaps reviews might drive your business and be a helpful aspect of your business. So I think it's completely appropriate, right, to have a referral ready to go. Not that's not an excuse per se, but I think it's good no matter what the situation is, unless it's inappropriate behavior. But to have a good parting of ways with any patient or client, and like you said, to have a referral ready to go.
Yeah. It goes on to say offer alternatives, recommend other professionals. So I guess I just didn't read far enough. Setting boundaries, we talked about that. Make sure you're not engaging in arguments. You set your boundary and that's it. Then it says to follow up. If necessary, send a follow-up message confirming the termination of services. Okay. Way to go, AI. Being
Yeah.
very professional. And then the last thing it says is maintain professionalism. So that's what AI suggests. And I think the big thing that I talked about earlier, and I think this is big thing that AI is missing, is the hardest part of communication, again, is assuming that it has taken place. So finding out the whole story before we just jump to conclusions. But sometimes it's going to be baloney that the reason, I had a flat tire or something like that. Every time they had 4 flat tires in a span of 3 months, it's like, I don't know about
I
that.
I was, as you were reading through that, I was smiled because I had a little reminder. I had a little reminder that there has been a course over some time in my career where I've chosen not to work with a client. So that, not necessarily fired, and I do want to start to get into this, right? And I think it would be a good education piece for people that are listening, right? How can we hear these things at the phone call, right? The yellow and red flags, I call them. But before we get into that, I've actually had clients that I chose not to work with, at the first visit. And I could tell, like, man, I am not the person for them. They're not the person for me. And I just don't want to jump into this rodeo. And I said, you know what? I don't think I'm going to be able to help you, but I have a great referral to you. And I send them off with that referral. And I've had these people turn around, leave me a 5-star glowing review about how professional I was. And even though I didn't work with them, I got them the help that they needed. And then I've had people call me up and say, hey, so and so referred me and said that you would be, totally able to help me. And I never even worked with the other person. I kicked them out of my office before we even got started. So that just goes to show you that professional aspect, like you say, I'm saying, and AI is saying, the Jetsons are saying, right? If you maintain that, man, that stuff comes back to you in a really, really positive manner.
Yeah, there's no reason to get dirty and nasty with anyone. That doesn't do anyone any good.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Well, I'm curious, Nate. Tell me about what kind of red and yellow flags you look for when you're talking with customers at the get-go.
I can remember a long time ago, I was taking a class and it was actually with our good friend. He actually auditioned for the show. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him, James Waslowski, if I'm
May
saying his
have
last
may
name
have
right.
heard the name once or twice.
Yeah, he's taught a few classes here and there. And I took a class with him a long time ago. And as a younger therapist, I remember James saying that, he got to choose the clients that he worked with. And I remember thinking about that. And I'm like, man, what does that even mean? Like, how do you choose the clients that you work with? I just need to make a living. Right. And you're kind of working with anybody and everything. Right. We're so thankful that you get to a point in your career where it's just rolling along and the word of mouth thing's like pretty awesome. You start to learn how to sort of work with the clients that you like James stated, right? You can start to pick and choose your clients who you want to work with. And on one hand, Ben, on one hand, I've found that over the years, I mean, 99.9% of my business is word of mouth. So the reality is person A referring their brother, sister, aunt, uncle, mom or dad, or kid or whoever, you almost know that's just going to be a gold star referral, right? And you know that that client, without having seen you, they're already in love with you because they've heard nothing but good things about you. They're excited to meet you. They're finally excited. Oh my God, I'm going to get on your table. I've heard so many great things about you, and I know that you're really going to be able to help me. Help me. And once in a while, right, I still get what I call a cold call, right? I still get somebody that calls me and I ask them at the phone call, how did you hear about me? And they'll say, man, I just Googled you, and you had some good reviews. And I looked over your website and I thought I would call you. So there's no relationship there, right? There's nothing there to bond us yet. And you start to listen to their story. And, yellow flags can be looked at a few different ways. Yellow flags can be looked at as like a yellow light, like, okay, I'm going to approach this kind of slowly, see where it goes. And, maybe I'll keep going or maybe I should stop. Right. And as they're telling their story, you just start to hear things that are either adding up or not adding up. And then maybe some of those yellow flags turn into red flags. One of those for me is, I've been everywhere, I've tried everything, and nobody's able to help me. And that's a red flag for me. And here's why. Because I'll start to hear the practitioners that they've gone to. And even though I want to put my superhero cape on and be the one, I'm going to be the one that's going to finally help you. The reality is I'm probably not going to be able to. The reality is that maybe there's just so many issues, too many issues to choose from with this particular person, that's holding them back. And maybe they're just not compliant, right? Some of those things tell me that perhaps they're just not necessarily compliant, nor have they been. So that's one of those flags for me that makes the decision at this point to, decide whether I'm going to book them. And most of the time, if it's a cold call at this point in my career, I'm choosing at the phone call to just say, you know what, right now I'm just not accepting, new patients, and just leave it at that. And one too many times, enough to halt it at the phone call. I've let somebody slip through the cracks, if you will, and then they end up in my office and it goes exactly what my brain was telling me the way it would go. And then at that point, now that they're there, you have to make a decision. Am I going to proceed with treatment, or am I going to go back to everything that you just said a few minutes ago and say, you know what? I don't think I'm the therapist for you, but I have a great referral for you. I did that actually just a couple weeks ago. And she was completely ecstatic that in her mind, she got the help that she was seeking.
We all just want to get helped. And, a lot of what you're talking about, I think, comes from experience, like learning what to listen for, but also being clear with yourself. What do I want to work with? Who do I want to see? Do I want to see the people that are like, well, tell me what's going on with you? Oh, nothing. I just want to, I just wanted some work. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think I'm the right person for you.
Yeah. Or maybe I hear things like, I'm just looking for a massage.
Mhm.
Right. That's the type of work that I like to do and specialize in. Right away, that's like a red flag. And I'll say to the person, well, what does that mean to you? And they'll explain it to me, what's in their mind. And I'll say, you know what? I don't think I'm the therapist for you, but I have a great massage therapist to refer you to.
Yeah, so just because someone's looking for massage doesn't mean that they're a bad person or that they are, the wrong person. It's just not what
Right.
you're particularly looking for. And that's the great part about working for yourself. You get to decide who you want to work for or who work with.
In all these situations, Ben, all these situations, I truly, truly believe practically eliminate the need for getting to that point of having to have that sort of uncomfortable moment, that next step of actually firing somebody.
Yeah, and think about this. If you fill your day with people that you want to be around and want to see, I mean, how does that not make your day fantastic? I don't have to be around any negative Nellies. I don't have to be around. I get to choose who I get to be around. And if you're not a
Right.
person I want to be around, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means, hey, you're not the person for me. You can see somebody else.
Yeah, and many of us do it. Many of us have done it. We're all sort of guilty of it. The money in the moment sounds good. Listen, man, I had an extra bill this month. I'm just going to kind of suck it up for that 45, 50, 60 minutes. But man, think about how drained you are after that session with that
Yeah.
particular client.
Is it worth it when you
It's,
think about, oh man,
it's
I've got
totally not.
Jody on my schedule today. Oh
Jody,
my goodness.
poor Jody.
Yeah. I don't know. I just made that name up. I don't have a
No,
Jody.
I don't have a Jody either.
Yeah.
I don't think I do. Man, this is pretty cool. I like this topic.
Yeah, we got a couple of spin-offs that we can talk about too, but let's go back to what we like to talk about toward to wrap up things is what's a big takeaway from what we talked about today?
I think the biggest takeaway, and this is one of those moments where I hear both of us really, we're always on the same page with pretty much everything here. And, that's probably why we're at episode 21 with this podcast. But, I think the biggest takeaway is, right, the beautiful thing about years and time of experience is that in the the outlets that we have to share this information, right, via podcasts, via blogs, whatever, such an advantage to therapists hearing this stuff. And I think if therapists, one thing I want therapists to take away from tonight's episode is streamline that phone call, streamline that first visit information, verbalize it, email it, put everything in black and white and leave no stone unturned. And I think that's a big takeaway.
Yeah, have multiple copies of your policy. Have it on your website. Have it in your office. Have it in your brain. Have it everywhere where you can access it and your clients can access it. That way, there's no question about anything that you have going on.
Right. And I truly, truly believe that eliminates, it spells out your cancellation policy, which is probably one of the top 3 reasons for clients to possibly get fired and take advantage of you. Cuts out all that nonsense about your expectations in the office, whether it's politics or whether it's anything else that you don't want in your treatment room. And we'll lump those into one category. And I think that therapists can eliminate a lot of that stuff by following some of these steps. But at the end of the day, the other category, the unfortunate category of inappropriate behavior, I think just remember this: end the session, get them out, fire them, and put it out to your network, and just know that you're supported and be brave about it.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely not a fun thing to deal with.
Definitely not. What was your takeaway, buddy?
Oh man, I think in general, like just what you said, as long as you have everything in place and where you have uh, your expectations managed, there shouldn't be a reason for firing someone. There should just be, hey, you didn't follow my policy, or this is what I have going on. You're either going to not see me again. So let's just take no show, for example. Hey, I do need payment. So until you pay, you're not going to come back in. That is the policy. That is what's going on. So
Yeah.
the more clear you are on things, the easier it is to just make those decisions whether someone's going to come back or not. So you're not necessarily firing them, you're just letting them go because they're not following the rules that you have set up for your business.
I'm with you. I'm
Yeah.
I'm really with you on that one. Absolutely. And for the fourth spinoff episode, I know that you're taking notes over there. So for the fourth spinoff episode that we can go to with this is back to our good friend, the massage mentor, Diane. If you have employees in your office, how do you fire them, right? And what would some of the reasons be? So I'd like to visit that down the road as well.
Yeah, I have had to fire employees before, and that is
Hmm.
also not fun.
Teaser, another teaser.
Dun dun dun.
All right, my friend, you want to take us out?
Thank you for watching and listening to Ben and Nate's questions that we ask people on the internet. We ask questions that you can find on our Facebook page called what, Nate?
Ben and Nate's questions that we ask people on the internet. And by the way, you know what? You don't even know about this, Ben, but we're going to have a contest. Ben and I have been talking about the possibility of renaming our show to target our audience specifically for massage therapists. So we want you to comment on what you think the name of the show should be. And if we choose your title of the show, you are going to win. We're going to Venmo you $5 for a Starbucks coffee.
And we're also going to send you some of that brilliant, what was it called? Cryo freeze?
Cryo freeze.
Yes. And you can have your picture on the cover of Massage Periodicals.
Massage periodicals. I love it.
That is an amazing award for helping us out. So what we're trying to do is get the title of our show to somehow let people know that we're talking about massage. So we're talking about questions we ask people on the internet, but how do we relate that to massage? So if you have an idea for what we could alter or change our name to, give us some suggestions.
I love it, buddy. Hey, thanks for tuning into episode 21 of Ben and Nate's questions that we ask people on the internet, and we will see you for episode double twos.